Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, in space, no one can hear you scream about how your dad abandoned you. This is AD ASTRA. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I'm Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like AD ASTRA, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, this week, I got more medical news. I'm prepping myself for a little health screening that's coming up next week. I don't want to be indiscreet, but I'm actually prepping part of my GI tract. Let's just say my colon. I've had a colonoscopy once before, so I'm not really worried about the actual procedure itself. It's pretty easy, painless, but I am a compulsive over-preparer, so I've been kind of obsessing over the dietary changes they want me to make for like 5 to 7 days prior. But, you know, just like Katie Couric, I am speaking out about this publicly to normalize and dispel fears around getting the health screenings that people need to stay healthy, whatever those may be.
Good for you. I'm proud of you. You're taking care of yourself. You're doing what you need to do.
Thank you.
That's important. I've also actually had a colonoscopy once before, and there was just one day of prep, but it was miserable. That last prep day is terrible. Not a fun time.
I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, I think a lot of people probably don't follow all the instructions on the sheet. But my doctor sent out this thing. It's like 7 days before, stop eating all nuts, seeds, greens, raw vegetables, gristly meat. I'm like, man, that's my whole diet.
You're a big gristly meat guy.
I'm a gristle guy. Everyone knows I'm the gristle king.
They're always saying that about Ian. Man loves his gristle. No, it is weird. Like when you get instructions from the doctor that are like, stop eating vegetables for a while. It's like, no, man, you're supposed to say the opposite.
They're like, absolutely no fiber. I'm like, wow.
Aren't you supposed to tell me to stop eating mozzarella sticks? All of a sudden now I can't have broccoli?
Yeah, they're like, you should live on tater tots and chicken tendies. That's my diet this week.
I'll do what I must if that's what the doctor ordered. No, it's good. Best of luck, obviously. You're right, though. The actual procedure itself is pretty minor, in and out.
Yeah.
Not a lot of free colonoscopy accidents these days.
Let's hope.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, and I know you're dealing with a bit of a heat wave out west, but we're having the opposite on the East Coast. It's been like 45 degrees every morning this week.
Oh, man, I'm so jealous. I wish I could have that.
It's great sleeping weather, but then it gets up to like 83 in the middle of the day. So it's very strange. So like my throat is unhappy and my allergies are running amok because they're very confused at the current situation.
Yeah, we talked about that last time. That whiplash thing can really mess up your sinuses and all that stuff.
So, Ian, before we start talking about AD ASTRA, which I'm very excited to talk about, actually, I wanted to know what you watched this week that the listeners might think is interesting or cool.
So it just so happens that in our Virtuosity episode back in March, episode 119, if anyone wants to look that up, I brought Yorgos Lanthimos' previous movie called Poor Things because I really loved it. And then he put out another one this year. It's called Kinds of Kindness. So I'm bringing that one into the zone. I guess I'm a Yorgos Lanthimos fan. I really enjoyed The Favorite, which was 2018.
You're a Yorgos Fanthimos.
Oh, yes. I even liked The Lobster, which was weird and challenging, but I found it charming. And so this one's probably not my favorite, but I still liked it. And I don't want to say too much about Kinds of Kindness because this is a movie that while you're watching it, you frequently say out loud, what the fuck is going on here? And I think personally, it's best to explore that question in dialogue with the movie itself in real time rather than to be told all about it and form an opinion in advance. I want people to have the experience that I had. But I will say it features really delightful performances from a whole bunch of actors that I really like. Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, Margaret Qualley, Hong Chow, Willem Dafoe. So yeah, in general, if you don't mind a movie that starts out honkers bonkers and ramps up from there, you might like this movie.
It's interesting. I have not heard it getting that kind of awards buzz that Poor Things got.
Yeah.
It seems to be a bit of a sleeper right now.
I feel like it's a little more of a little diversion for him. Poor Things is such a beautifully constructed story, and not to mention the visuals. It hit all the marks of a top-notch movie. This one is more of like Yorgos got this weird theater company of actors actors that he loves to collaborate with, and they just did some weird shit. And it's still really fun to watch on screen, but it's really weird.
Yeah, looking forward to checking it out one day. But there's only so many hours in the week, and I decided to check out another new movie, a new release that just hit streaming.
Tell me about it.
I went and watched M. Night Shyamalan's newest, Trap, which starts off really strong. It's got a really cool premise. I don't know how much you know about the movie. I know you said you were actively avoiding learning anything, so I really don't want to talk about it in too much depth.
Yeah, I know the setting, and I know there's a guy there and his daughter or something, and okay, I'm like, let me try to not learn anymore, especially for a Shyamalan movie where I'm like, I would hate to learn too much of the interesting twists and turns.
Yeah, the trailers and the advertising for the film give away the central conceit. So there's really no twist to speak of, as far as I could tell in the movie. It's not one of his patented twist endings. I will say that the setting and the initial conceit is really great. And also, like, Josh Hartnett is just carrying it on his broad shoulders. He's, so yeah, I didn't realize Josh Hartnett was so jacked. That must be a new development.
Oh, okay.
He definitely was not in the Black Dahlia. He had more of a boxer's sinewy build in that one because he was playing a boxer.
That's true. It was probably the Oppenheimer workout that got him jacked.
Yeah. So he's really giving it his all. There's a good supporting cast, not a ton of recognizable faces. There are a few that pop up. M. Night likes to work with some relative unknowns. That's always been his thing. But he's, of course, got a prominent part in it for himself because, you know, that's just how these things go. And he is still not much of an actor. He's directing his little heart out. The movie didn't really work for me when it was all said and done, sadly. I think it's still worth watching because that first hour is really strong. And Hartnett's strong throughout, but some of the other performances are pretty weak and drag the movie down. And also, it strains credulity to a point that I just can't write off. I try not to go into movies with the mindset of they have to make sense on every beat, but it's got to make sense on some of them.
Yeah.
There's just a few too many contrivances that I couldn't reconcile with this one.
Well, that's too bad. It sounds like he was starting down the same road as Old, where the premise was right there. The beach that makes you old. Like, everybody knew that going in, and yet there was still a pretty fun movie behind it. Not my favorite of his, but would you say this one is not as good as that was?
Oh, it's way better than Old, but I fucking hated the movie Old.
Oh, okay.
I liked the memes.
Yeah.
I was very interested in the memes about the beach that makes you old. Not a fan of the movie, though. Although I did want to shout out, I haven't seen it yet as of this recording. It's not out. It comes out tomorrow, and I'll be watching it tomorrow. Rebel Ridge, which is the new Jeremy Saulnier thriller coming out, features Midsize Sedan from Old in the lead role. Remember Midsize Sedan?
I vaguely remember that there was a character like that, but I can't picture him.
It was a rapper. Aaron Pierce is the actor's name. He played Midsize Sedan in Old and was great in it. And he actually is the lead of Rebel Ridge. And for those that don't know, Jeremy Saulnier is the director of movies like Blue Ruin and Green Room, Hold the Dark. He's one of my favorite working directors right now. This was a movie that John Boyega was signed on to and dropped out mid-production.
Oh.
They replaced him with Aaron Pierce, who by all accounts knocks it out of the park. The early reviews are very strong.
Cool.
I'm really looking forward to it. But I digress because we've got our own movie to talk about that I very much enjoyed, almost to a surprising degree. Ad Astra, or should I say Dad Astra, or should I say Sad Astra? Because this movie's about a guy who's sad about his dad.
All those things apply. I was going to say Brad Blastra.
It's a good one.
We had fun with this. I think we had both seen it before. I watched it when it first hit streaming. And at that time, going into it, obviously I've been a sci-fi fan, but I wouldn't have said I was into slow, quiet space movies. I had trouble with Interstellar. I actually never finished watching that movie.
I also was not I finished it, but I wasn't a huge fan, like a lot of people are.
It has some similar vibes. On the other hand, I loved Arrival. I loved Moon, and there was Sunshine.
Solaris is a good kind of comparison to this one as well.
So I'm not sure I'm being totally truthful about whether I like this genre or recognize whether I did. But in any case, I watched it and I loved it. It's one of those movies where, like, if you like sci-fi, especially that kind of fairly realistic near future stuff, it makes you go, oh, this is cool. This is a genre that I like. Why don't they make more movies like this? And I guess one of the reasons is they don't always do well at the box office.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the movies you mentioned there, like Arrival, Moon. I think Arrival was relatively modest budget. Hold on. Yeah, Arrival cost less than $50 million. Moon cost significantly less than that. So there are people doing interesting, quiet sci-fi, but on a budget. And James Gray, I'll talk about it more when I get to the monologue. He's never been a moneymaker by any stretch. So giving him this kind of money to make a quiet, melancholy, Heart of Darkness allegory is interesting for sure. And of course, they attached maybe the biggest movie star in the world to it, and that I'm sure that got them some traction. But it's everything about this movie is very interesting in terms of like, how'd that all come to be? How did it all happen? And it's one of those few movies that had a troubled post-production, and I think it's the better for it. That rarely happens, where I'm like, you could see the studio's interference all over this post-production process. But like, I think they were right.
Like you said, they had a budget to try to recoup. So yeah, if you had made it as a lower budget indie moody sci-fi, then you would be best to leave the director alone and let him do his weird thing, even if it's not the action summer thriller that you want it to be. But even Gray clearly put big action stuff in this. This movie is like 2 movies, which doesn't bother me, but I could see how it throws a lot of people off trying to get on its wavelength because it's extremely mopey, quiet, introspective at points. And then it alternates with these action sequences that are absolutely Tom Cruise worthy, big summer blockbuster things, like the wildest out of left field obstacles that this action hero has to get past. And it just kind of alternates back and forth, moody scenes and those scenes. And it's all cool to me because I like the genre, I like the performances, I like the look and the style of it. So I bought in. But I have to say, this is a rare movie where on my second rewatch, there was a little drop off. Usually my love for the movies grows. They sink deeper into my heart. This time, although I still love all that sci-fi stuff, I love the concept, I love a lot of the way it was executed, but the human story, when I started to inspect it a little more closely and not just float through the dialogue emotional scenes, and I started to try to read the emotions that each of these characters was supposed to be going through, I was like, oh, it fell short. And maybe that's what audiences failed to connect with. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I will say, I don't know that I liked it less on my second watch. I will say that every time I've watched it, which is 3 now in the past, however many, 4 years, the second half of the movie is significantly weaker, in my opinion. Now, I think it's still above average. There are parts of it I really like, but it's telegraphed from the beginning, the central conflict that Tommy Lee Jones's character is out there and he's gone crazy. And then the movie keeps like revealing that, yes, he has actually gone crazy. But I'm like, yeah. You already told us that kind of when you were like, hey, we think your dad's trying to destroy the universe with power surges. Like they say that in like the first 20 minutes. And then every time they're like, oh, he's trying to destroy the universe with power surges. Yeah, we fucking know.
Yeah. And later someone's like, I have to tell you a secret. Your dad's trying to destroy shit. Yeah, that's what I thought. Because that's what the last guy told me when he pulled me into a room and told me his secret.
Yeah, that was like an hour ago. So I have not forgotten. No, I guess the whole movie takes place over 3 months, which is another thing that I did not think it really got across very well. Is just like how long and arduous this journey is.
They shortcut that. They shortcut a lot of the stuff. There's all this technology. The spaceflight is depicted in a trying to be a realistic, very grounded kind of way where that makes it feel cool because you can picture it as being real, but they do gloss over a lot of the actual technology that would be required. They say they have this antimatter drive that powers the ships because you're like, how can you go fast enough to get to the outer stretches of the solar system like Neptune? Those are really far if you Google it or you check your astronomy textbook. More than just like, we'll nap and get a feeding tube for 14 days and we'll be at Mars and we'll do it for 3 months and we'll be at Neptune. I was like, probably not. Probably that would be years, but they had to shortcut it somehow.
It's about 110 years and no, it's more. It's probably about 175 years in the future, I think, is when the movie's supposed to.
Oh, was there a specific date? I didn't catch that. I got it as like the near future.
They never say it, but you could see that Tommy Lee Jones's character was born in 2130.
Okay, I didn't see
and
that.
He's supposed to be about 80 or 90, I think, at the end of the movie. So yeah, give or take, close to 200 years in the future, which is not that. I don't know.
It's like we excuse fuzzy dates in a lot of movies because we've been watching sci-fi movies for decades and decades, and we've already watched plenty of movies that have taken place in our past that were about the filmmaker's future that were totally unrealistic. So like that part, I feel like that's pretty easy to swallow, and it's still a recognizable world. It has all these hallmarks of like what happens when you set up a base on the moon. Does it look like a conventional airport? And it has the newsstands and a Subway sandwiches, whatever.
I very much enjoyed that, actually, like that aspect of it, the kind of not so subtle dig at American commercialization.
Yeah, that was one of the places where the movie showed its sense of humor and had some fun little jabs at airline travel, as comedians love to do.
What's the deal with the subway on Mars?
To your point about the movie being anticlimactic, I really think it was. It made this smart decision. I guess we'll get there when we go through the story, but it does something smart at the end. But that smart thing is the least bombastic, least exciting, least wild sci-fi version of what could happen when the guy finally gets to the thing he's chasing the whole time. And so you're like, as a fan of smart sci-fi, you can go, oh, I get it. That's cool. They popped a bubble on you. But as a fan of eating popcorn and Milk Duds in a movie theater, you might be like, oh, that was dull. Like you come out of the back end of the movie with a lot less enthusiasm than you probably had in the first half.
Yeah, actually, your point about about popcorn and bonbons is funny because I was reminded of the old Eddie Izzard bit about British movies versus American movies, where he's like trying to eat popcorn to a British movie. And you're just picking the popcorn up to your mouth and keep like putting it down, deflating. And then American movies, you're just like, "Meow, meow." But this is paced very much like a British movie. And that, if you're going by that analogy.
Yeah, in the second half at least, like starts with a bang. We'll praise the first, especially the first few action sequences, really make the movie worthwhile. And so you can coast on that for a while, but depending on your energy level you bring, you might run out towards the end.
Well, you want me to get into the story of the production of the movie? Because like I mentioned before, there actually was a little bit of behind the scenes drama here.
For sure. Let's hear how this thing happened.
James Gray has never had much success at the box office. While his films are typically well-liked by critics and the audiences that do see them, they're not exactly moneymakers. Gray got his start making New York-based crime dramas, with the most successful of the bunch also being the worst in 2007's We Own the Night, which doubled its budget, but just barely, making it a massive financial success relative to Gray's other movies.
The night's not bad. In this economy, we're lucky if we own anything.
His 2016 adventure drama, The Lost City of Z, got his biggest budget yet at $30 million, but only managed to pull in $19 million despite strong reviews. So it was a little surprising when he announced in April of 2017 that he'd be making an $80 million space thriller starring Brad Pitt, set to begin shooting in July of 2017. It would be named AD ASTRA, and Gray compared it to his take on Heart of Darkness in space.
Making a movie of Heart of Darkness in a new setting? Easiest production ever. Just ask Coppola.
In June, Tommy Lee Jones joined the cast to play Pitt's lost space hero father, and in August, Ruth Negga, John Finn, and Donald Sutherland were announced as having joined the cast. Production would actually begin in mid-August of 2017 in the Santa Clarita area of California, with principal photography lasting about 2 months. However, test screenings did not go well, and significant reworking would be done to the movie. A voiceover narration reportedly written by Charlie Kaufman was added to the film.
I'm hungry. I should get coffee and a muffin. Maybe banana nut. That's a good muffin.
While significant reshoots were done to add more action sequences and human drama. These reshoots were complicated by the fact that Pitt was not available for them. The budget had now ballooned to over $100 million, and the studio also took Final Cut away from Gray, which he described as the most painful thing he'd ever experienced outside the death of a loved one. The film had its premiere at the Venice Film Festival in August of 2019 and was set for wide release on September 20th of 2019. Critics loved it as it sits at 83% on Rotten Tomatoes and is one of Gray's best reviewed films, but audiences were indifferent to Hostel, as it only has a 40% audience score. It would debut in second place with $19 million, losing a box office battle with the Downton Abbey movie, but edging out Rambo: Last Blood.
It's over, Johnny. It's over! Nothing is over!
Despite no real new competition in week 2, it would drop 47% and land in 5th place with $10 million. When it was all said and done, the movie earned $135 million worldwide, losing the studio about $70 million. It's likely the last time Gray will get a budget of this size for the foreseeable future, and the movie has failed to capture the audience reevaluation that other ponderous sci-fi has enjoyed to date.
I struggle a little bit with why the audience score is so low.
I've got to think that for the same reason we feel the first half is stronger than the second, some audiences that maybe were expecting a real rollicking sci-fi action movie and also saw the first 40 minutes of this movie were like, okay, cool. That's what this is. There's going to be like a big action set piece every 15 minutes. But then no, like it just stops for a long time. There's set pieces, but they're small. Sometimes they involve monkeys. You know, like the movie really does take its foot off the gas in the second half. So I could see people coming out and say like, oh, that was like a boring movie. There was no action at all. And even though there was, it was just so front loaded that you forget by the end, maybe?
That could be. It's not Armageddon. We just did a Michael Bay movie in the island, and obviously he backloaded that where the biggest, longest chases come one after another in the last half of the movie. And this movie does the opposite, gets more moody. I just come at it from a different perspective because I was actually thinking, based on the feeling that you get that you're watching that kind of quiet indie thinky sci-fi, I was like, oh, there's actually a lot of action in this movie. If this was really done by an indie director on a small budget, it might have that one action sequence at the top to get your blood going, and then it might give you no more action until something happens at the end for the final showdown. But this one starts with the space antenna scene, and then moon buggy scene, which we'll get to, space baboons, nearly crash landing a rocket, or first he has to climb up the butt end of a rocket as it's igniting. And to me, I'm like, whoa, well, they keep throwing this crazy action in this psychological drama.
Yeah, maybe that explains it right there, is that it's maybe not ponderous enough for the fans who were hoping for just a pure sad boy drama, and maybe not quite bombastic enough for the audiences that wanted wall-to-wall action. So it lands in this weird middle ground.
Yeah, I think there's some clue in there in that they took Final Cut away from Gray. So he couldn't really make it his way, but they couldn't totally reshape the movie. So they tried some stuff. Apparently, the wife wasn't even there. Liv Tyler plays the hero's wife. And was that all added?
Yeah, Brad Pitt apparently really pushed for that storyline to be added after filming, and he made himself available for those scenes. But there was apparently quite a bit of action shooting as well, because there was a second unit director brought on who is basically just like a stunt director, and he was the person who handled reshoots primarily. It's a bit hazy about what scenes were actually added for the action side of it in reshoots. There's always some bad information out there in IMDb trivia, so you can't really trust it. But by all accounts, there was $30 million added to the budget because of reshoots. Yeah, I'm not sure where those scenes are, but the action scenes we do get really work for me. But so do the quiet, contemplative scenes. Like, give me Brad Pitt looking sad in a recording booth in Mars over whatever the fuck those chase scenes in the island were any day of the week.
That stuff is fun, but I guess you got to be the right kind of audience for that. You mentioned in your monologue, you mentioned Heart of Darkness, and I don't know if it was before I knew that analogy or after, but I was like, this movie's a lot better if you picture Brad Pitt's Roy McBride as Martin Sheen's Captain Willard in Apocalypse Now. Like, it's the same type of journey. It's a weird odyssey. He's super mopey. There's voiceover, a lot of very quiet talking.
He's doing karate naked in a hotel room.
Yeah, he's punching mirrors.
I don't think you made that comparison before I mentioned the Heart of Darkness thing, but you did say that the movie reminded you a lot of The Odyssey, which obviously Heart of Darkness and Apocalypse Now are both based on. So you were right there with it.
It's got that story model. It's like, I've got to get from here to somewhere super far away, and now I have to go here. Oh, now there's a monster here, or there's a crazy thing that I have to escape the jaws of death yet again.
It's a monkey, literally.
Crazy monkeys. But yeah, something about watching it, if you're on the Martin Sheen wavelength, this movie can borrow some of the extra cool factor from Apocalypse Now. And you go, oh yeah, this is like Space Apocalypse Now. I'm into it.
I think a weird take about Apocalypse Now is that I think there are a lot of people who claim to love Apocalypse Now that have never actually seen it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those movies that, like, everyone knows. It's like a shorthand for like, well, that guy likes movies. But like, Martin Sheen's pretty understated in Apocalypse Now too.
Yeah.
Not the sequel to Apocalypse Now, but Apocalypse Now also. His character's not a big, emotive, over-the-top kind of action star. He's pretty much just mopey and pretty quiet and pretty reserved for the majority of that movie.
Yeah, a lot of those far-off stares. I was getting that from Brad Pitt. And it has that same thing where there's some kind of megalomaniac is your destination. Is like, who's this guy? How crazy is he? What has he done in these far reaches that I'm trying to get to? What am I going to discover when I get there? It's a great model. Like, if you're going to write a movie, that's not a bad model to base it around.
No, and yeah, when you're dealing with this future where there are settlements in outer space, it makes sense to build on it from there. Like, the further you get away from Earth, do the old laws still hold weight? Are things are people just losing touch with humanity because they're so far away? But then we find out, like, the Ruth Negga character was born on Mars and has only been to Earth once, and it probably took her like a year to get there. That's interesting world building for me, but she's almost like too normal, and it kind of undercuts the point that, like, the further you get away from Earth, maybe like the crazier shit gets.
We'll have to talk about that when we get to that scene. I think that's one of the missteps of the movie that has a lot of cool points, but might fail to do what you would really want it to do if you're trying to do this Heart of Darkness journey for the guy, because it's something missing that doesn't quite connect in that scene.
She does reveal for the third time, though, that his dad's gone crazy.
Your dad, we're telling you, listen up. He's bad. He's really bad. I don't know how many times we need to say this.
He, like, Brad Pitt's never even like incredulous about it. He's just like, okay, because that's just his character.
I realized he kind of is, but he says everything with the exact same tone, because the character is defining quality as he's emotionally 100% flat, perfectly flat, never reacts to anything. So it took me a second watch to realize that he's actually vehemently arguing with the idea that his dad could be bad early on, but it sounds exactly the same as when he's agreeing, because he doesn't change his tone of voice.
He has one line to Donald Sutherland about, my dad's a hero. They're trying to impugn him. I think it's despicable.
Exactly.
But he says it like you would order a sandwich.
Exactly. That was the most indignance he could muster. But kudos to Brad Pitt for leaning into that character. He didn't fall for that temptation of doing traditional Hollywood lead actor histrionics and play the scenes big and emotive, because that's not what the character called for. This guy's checked out, and he really embraces that.
It's not bad acting. It's a choice for sure. And we know Brad Pitt is capable of very dynamic performances. And even he gets a chance to do a little bit in this movie. And that could be part of what audiences just didn't connect connect with either. We wanted to see Brad Pitt doing the Brad Pitt stuff. He's just kind of mopey.
Yeah, you're right. That could be a large part of disappointment is like, even though there's action, every time Brad Pitt comes back on screen, you're like, why is he such a downer?
Yeah, which I dug it because I'm depressed.
Yeah, I related, but I like that could be a bummer for audiences who, even though he's doing Tom Cruise type stuff, he's not beaming that Tom Cruise energy in the scenes.
He doesn't have that weird middle tooth in his face. You know about the middle tooth, right?
I've seen him caricatured where it's highlighted, so I think I know what you're talking about.
So for the listeners who maybe are not familiar with it, the middle of one of Tom Cruise's two front teeth is perfectly in the center of his face. So like his jaw is just misaligned.
A little to one side, yeah.
And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. So apologies for any listeners that can no longer enjoy Tom Cruise movies, but yeah, it's there.
I'm going to forget I heard that.
Do you want to get into the synopsis so we can talk about some of the plot points in the movie a little more specifically?
Yeah. It is the near future, and Major Roy McBride, played by Brad Pitt, is an extremely competent American astronaut known for being supremely cool under pressure. Roy's father is the legendary space explorer Cliff McBride, played by Tommy Lee Jones. The senior McBride left Earth and his family decades ago to lead the Lima Project, a mission to establish a space observatory near the planet Neptune and conduct the definitive search for signs of intelligent life in the rest of the universe. But all contact with the Lima Project was lost 16 years ago. Now, a series of cosmic ray pulses have begun striking the Earth, causing massive disruption and threatening the stability of the entire solar system. And they appear to be coming from the area of Neptune. Space Command recruits Roy for a special mission. They want him to fly to Mars, from where he'll be able to beam a personal message to Neptune to ask his dad what's going on and please stop it. So Roy hops on a commercial flight to the moon where he'll be able to catch a long-range rocket to Mars. But the moon is a conflict zone where rival factions compete for resources. And on his buggy trip to the Mars launch site, Roy is attacked by pirates. Roy escapes and makes it to the rocket, but his father's old colleague, Colonel Pruitt, played by Donald Sutherland, suffers a cardiac event and can't continue along with him. In his dying state, Pruitt passes Roy a secret briefing the government hadn't intended him to see. Spacecom believes Clifford McBride severed communications intentionally, and if he doesn't respond when his son reaches out, they intend to take all measures to destroy Cliff McBride and the Lima Project. With all this weighing on his mind, Roy joins the crew of the spaceship Cepheus and begins the journey to Mars to complete his mission.
Really, really good first act of a movie here. Does just about everything right.
Yeah.
And let's start with the opening. When I say the opening scene, not the opening like text scroll, because I wasn't really a fan of that.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't tell us anything that the movie doesn't explicitly tell us later. The movie has a habit of repeating itself. I'm starting to notice.
Yeah, a little bit.
There is like a text scroll that just, but I did like when the rest of the text fades out and To the Stars remains, because as we know, To the Stars is Latin for Ad Astra.
Yeah.
No, Ad Astra is Latin for To the Stars.
Yeah, that. I know what you meant.
You got me. But let's talk about this opening action sequence, this power surge on this kind of, I don't know, how would you describe this space station that he's working at? It's in low orbit. It's not even in orbit, really. It's tethered to the Earth.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've heard imagined that you could do space ladders. I guess we've seen other movies where there were space ladders. This is supposedly a space antenna. So it's like an observatory, but some part of it goes all the way down to the ground. But it's kind of up in space, right? It's not zero gravity, but it's pretty dark up there.
Reduced gravity. It's fucking cool is what it is. I find inner space, if that is indeed the correct term, and if it's not, kiss my ass, I don't care. But I find it infinitely more visually interesting than outer space because, for one thing, outer space has been done quite a bit. It's dark, it's vast. The whole appeal of it is the vast unknowability. That's cool as a concept and certainly lends itself to movies where like you go space crazy. But
sure,
just being able to see the Earth from that angle and from that distance is really cool. And apparently those were like matte paintings used to do, like, he really went old school with a lot of the visual effects where he could. And I think it pays off. There's like a real tangibility to a lot of that stuff. And like, you just like, I got like butterflies in my stomach when he first like leans out over that walkway and starts going down the ladder.
Yeah, it's cool. I love that it establishes what kind of sci-fi world this is. It's very realistic, and yet it's impressive that they've built this structure, but it's like you put on this sort of semi-pressurized spacesuit and you can go outside and work on the outside of the antenna just by walking down a ladder. And the workers wear parachutes just in case they fall off. And thank goodness Brad had one. But yeah, it establishes that world. It looks really awesome. There's a lot of neat stuff to see. The way that the pulse hits this giant antenna and the explosions start rolling down the superstructure towards the hero, and he shuts down the power. He proves his mettle. He teaches us what we need to know about him, that he's supremely cool under pressure. And we know about the sci-fi world. And those pulses weren't just a random thing that the hero had to deal with. They were the inciting incident of the movie. They were the pulse that is the threat to the solar system. So really effective how this first opening sequence, which feels like just action, is actually tons of important exposition and character building. And the movie really starts off strong.
Yeah, I think it would have been a big swing and a miss to just have an action sequence here for the purpose of showing us the character's composure and coolness under pressure. Like a worse movie would maybe think that's worthwhile and not come up with an interesting and creative way to tie it into the main conflict of the movie.
Yeah, that way it's like when they call him in, he survives this crazy thing. Because not only does he get blown off the side of this thing, his parachute gets ripped up with debris on the way down, and then he's fine. And then they call him into this meeting. They're like, yeah, you know that fall you just had? Guess what? It's related to your dad. He sucks.
Yeah, we think your dad's gone crazy. It's the first time we find out, not the last. But it's another really cool scene with the Spacecom bigwigs, which we were talking off mic, John Ortiz and John Finn, who are both kind of great character actors. John Ortiz is a personal favorite of mine, and I'm really enjoying him on Bad Monkey lately, which I talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I gotta watch that.
They play these kind of career bureaucrats really well, and you get the sense that they're not necessarily hostile to Roy, but they're also not necessarily telling him everything they know. And there is some like implied menace to them.
Yeah, there's a lot of good screenwriting technique in this first section because they make him do pure exposition, which could in other situations be a really boring exposition dump. They go, what do you know about the Lima Project? And who was the commander of it? And he's like, Lima Project was the thing that did this. And the commander's my dad. And it's like, of course you would never, it's like the old, hey, as your brother of 27 years, it's one of those.
Listen, man, I've been your best friend for 20 years. You can tell me anything.
Yeah, it's one of those, but it's not dumb for them doing it because the reason they're making him say all that stuff is just to test his emotional response. Everyone in the room knows all that information. They know the answer. They know he knows the answer, but we needed to find that out. And the whole reason they're saying it is to test him because they're not sure how he's going to react.
Yeah, they're taking his temperature. And it's just a cool scene, man. I don't know. I like loaded boardroom conversations with the bigwigs. I don't know. This shit it's all working for me, man.
It is working. One of the things that I think people question, and one of the things that apparently happened in reshoots, was the addition of the voiceover, which we already noted makes it even more like Apocalypse Now. But I came away, and voiceover is sometimes it takes people out of the movie. For this movie, it's so internal, and our character's not going to tell us much that we need these moments. Apparently, in the future, you psychoanalyze yourself. That's how shit works. You just talk to a computer and go, I'm like this, and I'm feeling like that, and I'm not worried about this. And the computer goes, yeah, I believe you. You're good. He has to do that multiple times in the movie, which is another way to get this very shut down, closed off character to reveal his emotions. And you can see that it's sometimes ironic, or that he's telling himself a story, or that he's coaching himself in just how detached and cool he is. And that's part of how he maintains his identity. But it really helps because it's a movie that's a lot about internal thoughts of this main character, and it manages to get at least a good portion of them on screen in a somewhat cinematic way.
I'm on board with this voiceover. I think the movie 100% needed the voiceover. We need some insight into our main character's mental being. And it doesn't feel out of place because the movie had clearly already written and shot in those scenes of him out loud describing his thoughts and feelings. And so like there is a expectation of kind of an inner monologue there. I don't know. It didn't bother me at all. It makes sense that it was added in post-production because it feels like James Gray really wanted to make the audiences work for this movie. And maybe the studio thought they were working a bit too much.
Let's give him a little hand. I could see that. There's one point where he's listening to another character, the first officer, talk about, oh, yeah, I'll go on the mission. And he literally, the voiceover interrupts with, he's scared. Like you get the immediate thought reaction of Brad Pitt's character. But I actually liked it because it helped me be sure that I was understanding what I was seeing on the screen and what the Roy character interpreted about it. So yeah, that worked. Let's talk about the moon, my favorite part.
The moon, M-O-O-N, that spells moon. The moon as a full-blown commercial hub / war zone is a really interesting take. And when I say interesting, I don't mean that in any kind of backhanded way. Maybe I should say it's a really inspired take because I dig it. It's close enough to Earth where it makes sense that like you could theoretically have refugees or pirates living out there as long as there's somewhere for them to take off their spacesuit at the end of the day, not float away. And there's apparently a fight over resources. I'm not sure what kind of resources the moon has.
One time they mentioned mining. So I think that's at least my vision of like how this came to be, that some corporations set up mining colonies and those colonies got taken over in warlord fashion. And now they're competing for resources with the more commercially funded stuff.
And we know governments would never hire mercenaries to do illegal things.
True.
That's never happened in the history of the world. Certainly, those pirates could not be funded by competing governments from around the world trying to hinder others. Definitely wouldn't be the case, right?
But they skate by all that because those guys are in spacesuits. They're attacked by 3 rovers full of people, and you don't see a single face of any of who they are. They're just like, oh shit, moon pirates. And it's rad. It's really fun. This scene alone makes the movie for me. And I think I coasted the rest of the movie on the high I got from this scene.
Not to put too fine a point on it, and to quote the great Leonard Maltin, it rocked my dick off.
Did Leonard Maltin say that?
Maybe. There's some things about this scene that, from a nitpicky point of view, I do take issue with.
Okay.
But yeah, it fucking rules. It's so cool. If I was being a contrarian, I would say, like, why don't they have some armored vehicles to drive these clearly important people from point A to point B, especially if they know there's pirate activity on the moon. Instead, they just have them in glorified golf carts. But
and it's funny you accept it because the only time we went to the moon, which was in the 70s, all they had were these open air buggy carts. So you're like, oh, I guess that's just how you drive on the moon.
You can put a roof on something on the moon. It's possible. It might not be popular, but it is possible.
But yeah, if you start to question it, like, why did he have to go on an off-road drive to get to the rocket launch base? Like, why isn't there an armored car? Why wasn't there a tunnel with a little cart in it or something?
We know they're mining. You know, they're digging tunnels. Dig one of them tunnels.
But thank goodness for the movie that there wasn't. The battle is great. I thought it was all CGI, but apparently I learned afterward they rigged up some of these actual 4-wheel off-road kind of car things, chopped the tops off of them and made them look like moon buggies. And they did a bunch of actual chasing in the desert.
Shot them in the desert. Really cool idea. There's a lot of little touches like that throughout the movie that show you when you get a director who doesn't make action that often and give him the resources to do it, he approaches it differently than maybe somebody who's like Michael Bay's like, well, CGI it.
Yeah.
But no, like James Gray probably doesn't know any CGI artists. He probably doesn't know how you have to block those shots to CGI them later. So he's like, fuck it, let's do it live.
Yeah. Apparently they ended up doing a ton of CGI over it because real desert dirt doesn't look like moon dirt and things don't move the same. So it sounds like that's where a lot of the budget went, but I'm really glad they put it in.
It's a scene that's not well regarded,
really?
Which I was surprised. Yeah, just again, from an audience point of view, reading audience reviews, which don't ever do that. I don't care
Okay.
how curious you are. Most people shouldn't be allowed to write their thoughts on the internet.
Probably true.
But this scene came up a lot as like, it comes out of nowhere. It's got nothing to do with the rest of the movie, but it's world building. And it also plays with the theme that, like we said, the further you go on this journey, the worse and the weirder shit gets.
Yeah, it ties back to that Odyssey format where the obstacles aren't necessarily all in line with the main problem. They're just like, this guy's got to go deeper and deeper into space. And wouldn't you know, that gets wilder and shit gets more and more fucked up as you go. It has that sort of different waypoints on a journey feeling. But man, I was like, yeah, I would stay on the moon and watch the warlord battles there because that was cool.
And Gray did say that part of his inspiration for making this movie was just learning about space and how hostile it is to people.
Yeah.
And like our attempts to get out there and the hubris involved, because space doesn't want us out there. It actively works against us every step of the way. And he wanted to show that, which you could say these are humans, sure, but I think it ties in nicely to that theme.
Yeah, those things, those resonate at a human level. Like, I know I used to have space fear where if I thought too deeply about actual people in actual outer space, I had a little claustrophobia panic moment where I was like, space is just so hostile that the fear of being out there can trigger some really deep stuff.
You know, I have terrible news. There are astronauts stranded in space right now.
I know that is a scary ass story, man. I'm just like,
I guess they're okay for now, but like that still sucks.
I just kind of breezed those stories and I had to go, they know what they're doing. It'll be fine. I can't think about it too much.
You just shook your head and went, space, man.
Fucking space, man.
Fucking space, man. All right. Anything else from this section you want? Oh, we should talk about Donald Sutherland a little bit.
Yeah. He has a small role and he's charming and just entirely credible from the first moment he comes on screen, which is the power of Donald Sutherland.
Yeah. You want an old, wise authority figure. You cast Donald, like Donald Sutherland was like an old, wise authority figure in Invasion of the Body Snatchers. which was like in the 70s, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's just been that guy for as long as he's been in the public eye. And there's a bit of a meta play here because Tommy Lee Jones and Donald Sutherland played fellow astronauts in Space Cowboys back in the early aughts.
Okay.
Actually, there are some stills from that movie used in this movie, I believe, just with some reworking done and like the patches on their spacesuits and stuff to show that they're...
I heard about that, and I think I saw where they used that because there's like an 8x10 portrait of Tommy Lee in his earlier years, like up on one of the walls celebrating the
that's
famous
the one.
astronauts. Okay.
When he's sandwiched in between like Buzz and Neil.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, speaking of Neil, did First Man come out the same year as this?
Oh.
You got two Sad Boy astronauts in the same year that bombed at the box office?
It could be. We could have done a whole series.
First Man was 1 year earlier.
Okay.
I really liked First Man as well, though. Maybe I'm just a sad boy astronaut at heart.
You might be.
Stay tuned. We'll probably get to that one next year.
We'll have to at some point.
And I want to do two of those too close together, two sad boy
No.
astronaut movies. Yeah, but Sutherland, he works, man. And it's deflating for the audience when you find out he can't go on because he just resonates and exudes comfort. He's like an actor and a face we know and trust. And it's hard to imagine too much bad stuff happening when Donald Sutherland's right there. But then he's like, I can't go.
The subtext is a tip off that you're leaving the world of safety, no more companion. And he literally says that. He was going to be my
security blanket.
Yeah, something like that. Doesn't he? Isn't there a line like that?
Yeah. Security escort or something. Like, yeah, he says something like that. Not blanket.
Yeah. He's literally there to comfort him. And nope, you're on your own.
Quick thing about the movie's sense of humor, like we mentioned, this is where the movie kind of shines in that regard. And the only place where it does. It's a very serious movie, but the moon looking like LaGuardia is a pretty funny joke, but also feels like the most logical conclusion if we ever do commercialized space travel.
They remark on it, right? Because Roy and Pruitt...
There's a voiceover conversation that Brad Pitt has with himself about if my dad could see this, he'd tear it all down.
Yeah, so he's offended. He's offended if you listen closely and you actually listen to his words. But again, his tone of voice is totally neutral, that he's outraged at this stuff. But yeah, it's fun to see that. I don't know. We always get tickled by familiar things in new environments. You go, oh, that's the thing. I know that. There's always one of those in the airport. And so it's...
Yeah, there's a DHL office. Who's shipping stuff to the moon?
You gotta ship stuff, man.
What does it cost?
How do they get their Amazon packages?
Got their FedEx planes or shuttles flying to the moon. And then I was a little surprised that Virgin Atlantic was like, sure, use our branding in the movie, because probably the joke of the movie is when Brad Pitt asks for, what does he ask for? A hot towel?
Yes. Oh, he says, may I have the blanket and pillow pack, please? And the Virgin Atlantic flight attendant goes, sure, $125. And he pays with his thumbprint or whatever.
It's a very subtle joke, but it's a joke nonetheless. And a broad humor would feel super out of place in this movie. So that's about as close as we're going to get. But also his character seems pretty well off. I guess astronauts, there's clearly more of them than there are currently in the future, but they still seem to be pretty well compensated. His house is nice.
He's doing all right. Yeah, he lives in a nice house in a nice part of the world, wherever that is. Looks like Northern California or something.
Yeah, they're not fighting over resources out there. There is like some hints that things are not so great on Earth in terms of resource allocation. Otherwise, why would we venture out this far into outer space? But
yeah, and there's a subtext that it's just assumed that we really badly need to find some other intelligent life, because that's the whole purpose of the space antenna, is to find intelligent life, they mentioned. And then the whole purpose of the Lima project was to set up an observatory outside of the effects of the heliosphere so they could really look further. And it's like, what's going on Earth where it's our only hope is we got to talk to somebody else. There better be someone else out there who can save us.
Yeah, what if they're like, we don't know. We don't have any ideas. Realistically, we would just kill them and take their stuff.
We would just take their stuff, yeah. But like, we were coming to ask you guys. We fucked up our planet. We were hoping you would have an answer.
You guys heard of coal? Yeah, man. It fucked us up too. All right, you ready to get into the second act?
Yeah, let's hear what happens next.
I bet he goes further into space and more wild shit happens, but time will tell. Halfway to Mars, the Cepheus receives a distress signal from a nearby medical research station. Roy doesn't want them to stop, but he's not at liberty to disclose the true nature of his secret mission, so he goes along with the rescue effort. Roy and the captain board the research station and find the crew dead. Then they're attacked by a pair of raging baboons who escaped their test lab. A baboon kills the captain, and Roy barely escapes back to his ship. Later, as the Cepheus is descending to the surface of Mars, they are struck by another one of the cosmic ray pulses. Roy has to take over control of the ship from the struggling first officer, and he makes a successful manual landing. Roy is welcomed to Mars by facility director Helen Lantos, played by Ruth Negga, and then he proceeds to the secure communications hub, where he begins sending his scripted messages to his father. But after a couple of attempts at contact, Roy breaks down an uncharacteristic unrealistic show of emotion. He goes off script and makes an emotional plea to his dad. It works, and Space Comm receives a response, which allows them to pinpoint the father's location. But they also declare Roy emotionally unfit and say he can't go on the mission to Neptune. As Roy struggles with being shut out, Helen Lantos comes clean to Roy with a terrible secret. Her parents were part of the Lima Project, and she reveals that the senior McBride killed them and his entire crew to prevent them from returning to Earth. So she decides to help Roy sneak aboard the Cepheus so he can go to Neptune and confront his dad. He gets aboard, but the crew treats him as a hostile invader and a struggle ensues. Tragically, the crew are all killed and only Roy survives. So on the long journey to Neptune alone, Roy reflects on his life and prepares himself for a fateful confrontation with his father. So this is the third time we get the revelation that his dad is crazy and has killed people.
Yeah, at first we don't trust him, and then Donald Sutherland's like, Spacecom really doesn't trust him because they think he might have cut him off on purpose, and if he doesn't answer, we're going to have to blow him up. And then she's like, let me play you a tape. This is your dad killing my parents, caught on audio. And it's like, holy shit, okay.
Because they wanted to leave the Lima Project and go home. And,
yeah.
He wasn't having none of that.
They had a fight, and it was Shades of Event Horizon, which had maybe a more graphic recording of what happened to the crew of a spaceship.
Yeah, I didn't see anyone cupping anyone's eyeballs in their hand.
There was no sex with mutilated body parts, but there was some just horrifying screams. It was just an audio recording, and you're like, oh, they made that harsh, because they don't say that he like went crazy and stabbed them through the eyeballs. They say he just turned off their life support, but there's some hideous shrieking on this audio tape.
If they turn off their life support, they're probably suffocating, which can be pretty excruciating, I'm sure.
Probably panicking.
But then when we see the actual bodies later, it seems like maybe there was more of a physical struggle than initially let on, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah.
But space monkeys, man. But first, let's get to Mars. Oh, no, wait, we already got to Mars.
Yeah,
yes.
Space monkeys are in between the moon and Mars, right? He's like, I got to get to Mars. And they're like, no, we got to stop for this little medical research station.
This captain who's a real joker. He's quite a character. Captain Tanner.
Captain Tanner, yes.
Yeah, played by Donnie Kashwarz.
I like him. I like that casting.
Yeah, he's good. He's very gregarious and also goes out of his way to be deferential to Roy because as far as he's concerned, Clifford McBride is a hero. And to listeners who haven't seen the movie, it's important to stress that Cliff McBride is like Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin combined and then on steroids to the rest of humanity. Like,
yeah.
He is the seminal astronaut of their time, the most famous astronaut. So,
and Roy is no chopped liver himself. He's had a distinguished career. So they're all like, oh, sir, it's an honor to have you on board. But yeah, this whole sequence, again, gets to contrast between Roy's ultimate cool under pressure. It's totally unflappable. His heart rate never goes up. And the first officer of the Cepheus, who's like cracks immediately under pressure. So Roy steps in. Like first he has to go with the captain on the mission because the first officer's too scared to go. And the captain dies on the mission and he has to take over pretty much getting the ship the rest of the way to the Mars and landing it. So I'm not sure what we're learning there. I guess it's the fact that Roy he's having these moments where he's showing some doubt about his dad, about his way of life. There's some flashbacks about him separating from his wife, but yet he just keeps showing that his old way still works. He is still the unflappable astronaut, and that wins the day in all these situations.
I think part of what they're trying to do with the first mate character is to show us that without the captain, without Captain Tanner, and Roy says this to them eventually, they're not going to make it to Neptune with the first mate as the new captain.
That's
it's
true.
A long, arduous journey. A lot can go wrong, and he's clearly just doesn't have it. You know, he's not.
Got it, yeah.
He doesn't have the juice. So, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that actor who plays the first mate.
Yeah.
Donald Stanford is the character. The actor is Lauren Dean.
Okay.
Could not place where I knew him from. He was a main cast member on Terriers, which is not quite justified with how often I talk about it on the pod, but it's not too far off.
It comes up a lot.
He was a big part of that. And I remember thinking, this guy's a strong actor. I don't know why he's not in more stuff. And then when he popped up in this again, I was like, he's doing a good job. Just playing a guy who's maybe in over his head, not quite Scoot levels, but he's in over his head. He's a sad sack in over his head.
Yeah.
And then I looked at his IMDb. He's been acting since the 80s. He's only got 34 credits, and 6 or 7 of them are space stuff.
Oh.
He's always playing astronauts, which is really interesting career. Like, he was in Apollo 13, Gattaca. What else? Others.
Oh, he was also in Space Cowboys.
He was in Space Cowboys. Like, did this guy really just want to be an astronaut? He was in a movie called Starstruck. I don't know if that has to do with space or
No, but we'll lump it in that category.
The Passion of Darkly Noon. Sounds like The Passion of Darkly Moon.
Yeah.
So it could be a space thing. But it's always interesting when you stumble upon an actor, and this happens more often now because we're actually like looking into these actors' careers, but he's been acting since the 80s and he's been in 30-something projects. Like, I wonder what he does. Does he have a day job? Or, like he's working actors, man. It's a very interesting career when you're in that middle ground of like a schmuck like me recognizes you, but maybe you're not getting these roles every couple months. It's more like one a year, but one every 2 years.
Yeah. You don't know. You could be doing theater productions the rest of the time.
Could be a hobbyist.
You could be building boats by hand the rest of the time. You just never know.
Interesting you went there, Ian. You're never beating the allegations that you long for the sea.
He could be secretly crafting a seagoing vessel in his backyard out of scrap lumber. That's something that people do.
Is that what you're doing, Ian? Probably had to take the week off with 104-degree weather.
It's hard, man. The pitch doesn't dry. I'm trying to
the humidity is probably throwing it off like crazy.
Speaking of like crazy, how about the monkeys?
Why are they so mad? These monkeys are furious. They're just pissed off. Like, they're probably hungry if they killed the crew, which is like 20-something people.
Yeah, so there's a little throwaway line that I caught the second time where they're like, the captain is going over the distress call and he's like, the station Vesta lists 26 souls on board. And normally that means people. So then they get there and everyone's dead. I'm like, holy shit, these two monkeys killed 26 people. It's a bloodbath, which they don't show. They don't show the bodies. But then I'm like, maybe it was 4 people and 22 monkeys, and that's how they got overpowered. I don't actually know.
You're raising a very important existential question, which is, do monkeys have souls?
Yes. For purposes of Spacecom, how are they counted? Are they among the souls? But whatever happened, their souls are in torment. I was like, are they testing the rage virus in this lab? Like, what? These monkeys, and they're so deadly.
Yeah.
Like, these people are wearing space suits with helmets.
They shred them immediately.
The monkey shreds the guy's helmet and eats his nose and eats his hand off within 10 seconds. Like, Brad Pitt goes down the other hallway for a few seconds and then checks in. Is like, Tanner, you still there? And no, Tanner's dead at this point, buddy, because the monkey silently killed him.
It's a very eerie and creepy shot when you see him from behind just spasming.
Yes.
And you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But then slightly funny when like a monkey's face pops out, because you're like, it's more like shocking than funny. It's a little shocking in a funny way because you're like, what the fuck is a monkey doing?
Yeah, it's horrifying, but it's just wild. And it is another weird creature that Odysseus has to defeat, get one more stop on his journey. Because why did Roy McBride have to fight monkeys in this movie? It's about him dealing with his dad, and now he's fighting a monkey.
Land of the Lost.
And then they try to tie it in, which this is one of the emotional beats where I was like, no, guys, it's getting a little thin there. He has it's either an internal dialogue or him talking to the psychiatric computer for another test where he's like, the monkeys were so full of rage. I've seen that rage in my father and I've seen it in me. And I'm like, okay, now we're getting a little bit literal with the psychoanalysis here.
Also, he has 0 rage. His blood pressure's never gone above 80.
Yeah.
Or his heart rate. And also, I bet they cut a scene where Ruth Negga's character is just like, also, your dad beat the shit out of these monkeys. Now they hate people.
On his way to Neptune, he tortured some monkeys.
to beat the fucking shit out of these monkeys, to make them hate humanity. And now they just kill everyone they see.
Yeah, it does. It gets a little funny armchair psychiatry when the hero flat out, like, he didn't have to say that. Maybe the studio made him say that. Like, he literally goes, I don't want to be my dad. It's like, okay, yeah, we knew that. You didn't have to say it.
I don't want your life. Go all Varsity Blues on him. Yeah, I'd say like, if you're cutting stuff from this movie, the monkey scene is the most obvious. But I don't know, man. Like, it's such a weird and unique sequence that I'm like, you got to keep the monkey scene in. It's very memorable.
Yeah, it goes with that theme of the explorer going deeper into the wilderness and seeing weirder and weirder shit. It's like, oh, fuck, space is weirder than I thought. I like that message.
But then when I was trying to reverse engineer my ideas about what could have been shot in reshoots, I was like, oh, maybe they added the monkey scene for another action scene. But there's too much stuff that builds off this sequence, such as the captain dying, the first mate now having to take control of the ship and sucking it. Like, it would have been too complicated to try to like rejigger that in the editing bay. It just wouldn't be possible. So I don't think that was an added scene, unless they really did reshoots that extensive to make that all work.
Yeah, they would have had to shoot a ton of stuff around it. If the captain wasn't dead, because then the rest of the movie, he's dead, and the first officer is then leading the Cepheus from Mars to Neptune. So that's another part of the story that it has has a knock-on effect.
Right.
It's hard to see. There's nothing that's obviously like
shoehorned.
Yeah, that feels shoehorned or gratuitous. There's a cosmic ray pulse out of nowhere while they're landing the ship on Mars. But that sort of establishes further, like we said, that Roy has to step up when the first officer, again, folds under pressure and he has to land the plane.
Yeah. And then he gets to Mars, which is pretty fucking cool. Latasha Leone's there.
Yeah, that was funny. She
just hangs out on Mars. She's like a Mars bureaucrat.
Yeah.
It's cool.
She's like the intake desk. Hey, come over here and sign in, please. And I'm like, hey, that's Natasha Lyonne. What is she doing there?
She's just playing Natasha Lyonne. Like, she's very much herself. So apparently the story goes, her and James Gray live in the same apartment building in New York. And he was going out to dinner and she like invited herself along. And he was talking about Ad Astra. And she was like, that sounds cool. Put me in your movie. I bet she threw in like an F-bomb because it's Natasha Lyonne.
Sure.
So he was like, all right, you could be the Mars like intake desk. And she like, it's just cool that she's there. It feels a little like stunty because so much of the other cast we were talking about is like Lauren Dean, like people you might recognize maybe, but you would never be like, oh, that's Lauren Dean. But then Natasha, and apparently Jamie Kennedy is in here somewhere too, but they cut him.
Okay, yeah. I saw that in the Wikipedia. I'm like, that's weird, but he's not visible in the movie as far as we know.
Maybe he was originally playing the Liv Tyler character.
Okay.
I'm glad Jamie Kennedy's not in this movie. I don't know that he fits in this world.
That could have taken us out of it. Natasha Lyonne actually adds nice flavor to Mars because she brings her vibes, which is ostensibly the vibes that Mars is supposed to have. It's wilder, right? It's a further outpost. It's more weird. There's some hints in her little intake room. There's some graffiti on the wall. This is the first time we've seen signs of decay. There's a poster on the door as Brad's leaving the room that she's in that says, crisis counseling available. Please call. There is hope. Like, it suggests that this place is kind of fucked up. But the problem I have is that the movie has this extremely cool tone and it's doing a lot of Blade Runner-y stuff with colored lighting and quiet scenes of people standing in very interesting architectural places and lights changing color. And that undercuts the sort of grimy, desperate effect that Mars, I think, was originally maybe going to lean to. I heard that there was going to be more stuff like prostitution and drugs and things visible on Mars, and then it ends up being a little bit sterile. So there's a little disconnect with like how are we supposed to interpret what life at the Mars station is like.
Yeah, that would have been cool actually to see that. I think the movie could have used a little injection in this second half because it does feel sterile. And I was also, this might be a silly gripe to have, but I'm not making a joke. I legitimately was like, why is all the lighting on Mars red? Like, all the light bulbs seem to be red or red tinted. It's like the planet is red. You think you'd want something different.
Give us some nice blue light or something.
Did they think we'd forget we were on fucking Mars? They have the rooms with the frankly very jarring nature images that are like on a loop, which maybe you're supposed to make you feel like but they would just make me go insane after 30 seconds.
Yeah, they make Roy go to this room that's like the comfort room or whatever that's supposed to make you feel better, but it's too intense. And that's probably on purpose. It's actually upsetting, the weird jungles and waves and clouds and various stuff that's flashing kind of garishly across every wall, like one of those experiential museums that you go to.
I was just at one of those a few months ago. It was very weird.
They're fun, but you might not want to be forced to sleep in one of them and stay there for days.
I didn't see a light switch either. I don't know if it's an optional thing. It might be mandatory.
But yeah, the red light is part of that effect that I was noticing, that this is also the section of the movie where Roy really experiences an emotional breakdown, right? Like, he's already starting to freak out. He breaks protocol by telling his dad, I want to see you, Dad. And that's the first time we've seen emotion. There's a little tear in his eye. And then he's really mad when they tell him, thanks, we've heard from your dad, but you can't go on the mission now. This is where he's having his actual emotional transformation. But because the visual style stayed so cool and so stylish, like you said, red lights and everything's shot for style rather than emotion, it kind of pours cold water on his journey, or it just makes it harder to absorb that from him because you're hypnotized by the stylish coolness of the mood.
Yeah, Mars in and of itself does not have anything super exciting going on. There's weird little flourishes, like whoever the lady is that comes in tells him you're relieved you can't go on because you're emotionally unfit, is wearing like a red suit with a red shirt and a red tie, which is like, all right, that's weird, but it's not weird enough for this idea that you're getting further out into space. It's going to get wild. It's like, all right, you got Natasha, like, and Natasha Lyonne has red hair. What are we even doing here?
Someone went overboard with the redness on Mars.
Yeah. And then the Ruth Negga character, Helen Lantos, is an exposition bot.
Yeah, I really like her. She always brings this cool intensity. I think she has a lot of great qualities as an actor and as a movie star. This is the part where the emotional story fell apart on me on the second watch because she has to communicate a lot. she has to go through this whole range of feeling where she's got to like befriend this guy, realize that he's in a fucked up situation, win him over, tell him that his dad killed her parents, but forgive him for that and get on his side and help him get on the mission. So she's communicating all this in still pretty spare dialogue because Roy never says a lot. And I was like, I couldn't follow her on that journey. Like her tone, like the whole thing just, it didn't click for me. So as much as I wanted to embrace that part of the story, I was a little bit taken out of it.
I had the same problem with her in this movie that I had with her in Presumed Innocent, which is not to say anything about her performance. Quite the opposite. I think filmmakers can sometimes be like, we cast a terrific actor. They could just bridge whatever gap there is between the material and, the performance will do the work for us. But you still got to write good, juicy stuff for that character to do. And if you don't, it's a wash. Like, it's a waste of a talent.
Yeah.
And I felt that way about her in Presumed Innocent. And I think I feel that way about her here.
I felt like they made her work too hard to try to carry this ball all the way down the field in this one long speech. And it was just like, you get it. It still works. The plot points are communicated and she helps him out and they move on to the next scene, but it's not the best.
I wish we got to see more of James Gray's original vision of Mars. Kind of a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that would have cemented that Heart of Darkness thing where this is truly, we're like almost in the deepest parts of the jungle now and things are different.
But then Roy kind of hilariously accidentally murders an entire crew of space astronauts. Like, you could play the yakety, what's the
yeah, yakety sax.
Yakety sax over this sequence and add a laugh track, and it would be hilarious because like he doesn't actively murder anyone. They all just kill themselves trying to murder him.
Yeah.
Which I guess is necessary to keep us on his side, obviously. And like he says, I had no hostile intent.
Yeah, the whole time he's pleading with them.
It strains credulity a little bit.
I'm not a hostile. You don't need to attack me. I'm going to help you. And Mission Control's telling them, eliminate the threat. And then the one poor lady, gravity kicks in and she face plants into the wall. And I guess her neck breaks or something. And then the other guy shoots a bottle of some kind of compressed gas and then both of them asphyxiate because Roy's the only one wearing a helmet.
He even tries to give oxygen to the first, well, now the captain.
Yeah, to your guy.
A little late in the game. But at some point, too, it's almost like, all right, we already lost one crew member because she face planted. Should we just let him come on? Like, what are we going to do this with two people? And we both suck at our jobs? Hey, we kind of need them. Like, maybe we should rethink this whole thing.
And the other thing is, by the end, you realize they were on a suicide mission because there was never going to be enough fuel for the Cepheus to come back, right? Roy has to rig up a clever trick to come home. But did these astronauts know that they were on a one-way mission? Anyway, I don't know if you're meant to pick up on that or contemplate that.
I don't think Spacecom is above sending these guys unwittingly on a suicide mission just based on what we know about them. So they might not have been aware.
They packed a nuclear bomb with them. They're like, go out there and do whatever it takes to kill Clifford McBride and blow up the Lima Project. But it's a fun irony that Roy, just after he learned how his dad savagely killed the crew of the Lima Project, Roy accidentally kills the entire crew of his ship. So that's a fun irony there.
You use the word fun a lot in a way that I don't know what I would describe as fun.
I just go through life having a lot of fun wherever I can.
Just having your gristly meat and having fun.
It's all gristle and fun at Ian's house.
All right, you ready to take us home?
All right, here we go. Heading home. After a long journey, the Cepheus closes in on the Lima Project space station. Roy parks the Cepheus in orbit and proceeds on a tiny transport capsule. But the capsule is damaged as it passes through Neptune's rings, and Roy barely makes it aboard the Lima station. There, he finds his dad. But Clifford doesn't want to go home. The whole reason he killed his crew was so he could stay out there and keep searching for other forms of sentient life in the universe. Turns out, there are none, and seeing the evidence of that is what broke Clifford McBride's mind and spirit. So, Roy plants the nuclear bomb he brought along to destroy what's left of the Lima Project and stop the pulses. Then he cajoles his dad into a spacesuit for the spacewalk back to Cepheus. But once outside the station, Clifford struggles with Roy, then finally breaks away from his son and drifts off into space to die. Roy must then navigate his way back through Neptune's rings to the Cepheus with only a hatch door in hand to protect him from the debris. He makes it to the ship, he detonates the nuke, and uses the blast wave to propel him back towards Earth. Eventually, Roy reaches home, and he commits to engaging with the people in his world. Having resolved his daddy issues, he uses his newfound emotional maturity to reconnect with his estranged wife.
Yeah, that ending feels like a studio note, right?
Yeah.
Like they were meant to drift away in space together and die.
It's kind of too cute. They come back to the psych evaluation mechanic as a way for the hero to explicitly lay out his state of mind. And it's somewhat satisfying to hear him when he seemed insincere before and always telling himself a story about how nothing distracted him and he was focused on the mission alone to the exclusion of everything else. Now he's like, I'm focused on the people around me and I will be there to support them and nurture them. And it's okay, that's a little too corny and a little too pat and easy.
You know what? The movie does deserve a feel-good ending, but it doesn't feel true to the story they were telling. And I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings about it because this movie's a bummer. Let's be honest. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes of just pretty bad shit going down the entire time. And like, it is nice to end on something nice, but it's also not the movie we were watching.
Yeah, you're right. He probably should have died there.
He should have drifted off with his dad. Also, his dad's a real fucking dickhead, man. Like, why did he have to drag? He could have separated himself from him when his back was turned and just drifted off. But instead, he pulls him a few thousand feet away from the station. So now he just gives him more obstacles to overcome every step of the way.
Yeah, they had to have a space fight. They couldn't have a totally quiet downer ending. Roy had to literally wrestle with his dad in space. And he's like, unhook me. And it's like, the physics of that fight didn't really make sense. You're right. He could have just unhooked himself and drifted off. And instead, they had to make it a little wrestling match, which the physics didn't make sense. A lot of the physics in this last section started to test my sci-fi brain of like, am I going along with this? Using the hatch. He grabs this little hatch door off
the hatch door to shield himself from this.
He blocks all these rocks that make up the rings of Neptune. And like, I don't think the rocks are just sitting stationary.
No, they seem to be moving. Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that, I'm no space scientist, but wouldn't you think that whatever debris makes up the rings of a planet are probably orbiting that planet at hundreds or thousands of miles an hour, like everything else that orbits planets is? And so if he was stationary in relation to them, they would be coming at him from the side at incredible velocities instead of him just pushing through them
and just
gently.
Beating the absolute shit out of him until he's dead.
Yeah. They torn him to pieces. So I don't know. You hate to nitpick the physics of a sci-fi movie, but they were stronger, or at least they glossed over them better in the first 2/3. In the end, there was more things that I bumped on. Especially
considering that this halo of rocks was destructive enough to damage his shuttle to the point where it was unable to dock at the space station. And now he's just a guy out there in a spacesuit that we've seen many times is very susceptible to tears and breaks.
Oh, yeah. Got torn by the pirates.
Got torn by the pirates, and the captain's face mask gets brutalized by a single monkey.
A little monkey just bites right through it. So
they're not made of adamantium or whatever. They're pretty flimsy against the rigors of space.
Yeah, he was definitely using Hollywood hero armor to survive that particular encounter.
And it's like, if you're on board with this movie up until the ending, you'll be on board with Brad Pitt dying in Neptune, because you clearly have an affinity for sad boy sci-fi. And what's more sad boy than dying in space alone?
Yeah, he could have had an epiphany. It's funny how much this movie resembles the Green Knight story, which we just covered, because the character has an epiphany at the end. Like, I've been living my life wrong the whole time, and now I get what's important in life. And he could have had that epiphany, beamed a message back to Liv Tyler, and then sacrificed himself in order to blow off the thing and save the solar system.
Yeah. Now, off with your dad.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Cliff a little bit. We haven't really touched on Tommy Lee Jones or Cliff McBride at all.
He's a mystery figure looming over the movie for a while. You only get these short clips of him, and you hear more snippets over time. And Tommy Lee Jones, I liked the specific type of crazy, obsessive guy that he was playing in these short clips of him. And I thought he was really effective. I believed him as both the pioneering space researcher and the madman who went too far.
Yes, I think to be a pioneering space scientist, to use your term, you got to be a little crazy.
Yeah.
And the reason he goes off the deep end feels true to the character, the movie, and the reality of the world they're living in. I think it was a smart pivot to just focus on the fact that there is nothing out there, and that broke his mind. It makes a lot of sense. I thought it was a really smart choice, as opposed to he went space crazy just from being isolated too long, or he did find aliens, but they were dickheads.
I mean, that's what I was thinking. I can remember the very first time when I saw this movie, I'm like, when he gets there, it's going to be that he discovered the aliens and they infected his mind or whatever. You know, like in a Hollywood action movie, you're expecting a bigger alien reveal at the end. And it's really just, oh no, the old scientist couldn't accept the idea that there was no life to be found. And so he just became obsessed, and it drove him over the edge. And that, I think you're exactly right. That's a cool, smart decision, but it does fuck with the studio who's trying to make this movie a little more palatable, because it's smart and it's also anticlimactic. It's like, guess what? There was nothing. The problem is that there's nothing, and life is hard, and sometimes it breaks you.
Yeah, it's a bleak message, especially given like the hints about how dire the situation is on Earth. It seems like there is no solution now. But the movie's like, he's back together with Liv Tyler. Who cares about all that?
It tries to insert some message, but Roy collected all his research, and look at the amazing information we learned about these other barren, desolate planets around the universe. Like, isn't that going to help humankind? I was like, I don't know if I can really connect the dots on that, but sure, it's nice that you're feeling positive positive about it now.
I only noticed these kind of issues on the second watch. I will say my first watch, like you, I was very on board with just about every aspect of it. But when that second watch hit and those last 20 minutes, I was very tempted to skip them. You know what I mean? I was just like, I was not bought into that whole aspect of the story. And I was like, I could turn it off here and be fine. I remember what happens, but I stuck through it and my suspicions are correct. Like it's a bit of a letdown at the end.
It's very interesting that way. Well, I think that's been our feeling the whole time. Like the first half of this movie is like, fuck yeah, this is a kick-ass space movie that's both thoughtful and exciting and cool and has a lot of fun genre stuff to get into. I think for that reason, I would still recommend it. I'm not that down on this movie.
Oh, yeah.
It probably makes us sound more down because we did the same thing the movie did, which is end on the low note, but it's still good.
No, I think it's like a solid B+ for me. But like for the first 45 minutes, I was like, this might be like a masterpiece. And I definitely wasn't on that level when I ended it.
Yeah, it's too bad because it had so much potential. It's too bad it fizzles a little bit, but I'm still like it. I'm glad we had the chance to come back to it after having watched it and liked it. And I'm still glad that they made this movie. Like I want to see more movies like this getting made.
Bad news, buddy. This movie lost like $70 million, so chances are slim. James Gray has gone on to make some other movies. Did you want to hear what he's been doing?
Yeah, let's get into that. What is he at least qualified to keep getting budgets for?
He got a decent sized budget for his next movie after this one, which was a very personal story about growing up in Queens.
Okay.
Called Armageddon Time, a movie I believe I brought for show and tell years ago.
Okay.
And it had a $15 million budget, which is about all the money you need to tell this story.
Yeah.
Great performances from Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong, but it lost a ton of money again, only made $6 million.
Shit.
It pains me. I do not mean to dump on James Gray for his movies never making money because I like his movies a lot. And he's also, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, he's my homie from the old hood. I've never met him, of course, but he was raised in the same exact part of Queens that I was.
That's cool.
And Armageddon Time features a weird character of a young Donald Trump at school, which is interesting. Jeremy Strong plays the father in Armageddon Time, movie that features Donald Trump, and now he's going to be in, the name of the movie escapes me right now, but he's playing Roy Cohn in the upcoming Donald Trump biopic with Sebastian Stan playing Donald Trump.
Okay. I've heard Sebastian Stan's name mentioned in connection with that, but I didn't know anything about it. That's an interesting connection.
Jeremy Strong is just a phenomenal actor. Any complaints about his methods from his co-stars are certainly worthwhile. Method actors can be a pain in the ass, but you can't deny the results. I've never seen him give anything but a stellar performance.
Yeah, that'll be wild to see him as Roy Cohn.
But so Gray lost a bunch of money on Armageddon Time, but he has 2 movies in pre-production.
Okay.
I Am Pilgrim and Ezekiel Moss. And he was rumored to be working on the TV show Mailer, but there hasn't been any news on that in a while and it never came out. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But I want to do a quick retrospective on his career because I think a lot of his movies are lesser known and worthwhile. So if some listeners wanted to check them out, I did not want to deprive them of that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So he started off with Little Odessa, which is a kind of crime drama set in Brighton Beach, a neighborhood in Brooklyn, where Lord of War also took place.
I remember that.
That stars Tim Roth, won the Silver Lion at the Venice International Film Festival, made no money.
Okay.
He would follow it up with The Yards in 2000, which was his first of many collabs with Joaquin Phoenix. That movie was like shot in 98, not released till 2000, lost a bunch of money, but I really like it. And I think that's, of his like crime dramas, that's probably my favorite. He wouldn't get another movie until 2007's We Own the Night, which is like an Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 situation where he was like, I'll just tell the same story, maybe, and like with a bigger budget. Maybe people see it this time because it was another Joaquin Phoenix and Mark Wahlberg crime drama set in New York.
Okay.
But it was not as good as The Yards, in my opinion. But it made the most money relative to its budget of a James Gray movie. It did not make $130 million like Ad Astra did, but it made like 60, which is a lot for him. And then he followed up with another movie with Joaquin Phoenix called Two Lovers, which was his most critically acclaimed movie, but lost a bunch of money. And then he followed it up with The Immigrant, starring Marion Cotillard. And do you want to guess who the other actor is?
Could it be Joaquin Phoenix?
It is. Lost money, but got good reviews. Are you noticing a pattern? And then his next one after that would be The Lost City of Z, which we talked about a little bit. Lost City of Z is worth watching just for the bananas Robert Pattinson performance.
I think I didn't get to him. I tried watching that movie once.
Yeah, he comes in like halfway.
Okay. It was slow and I couldn't stick with it. I gave up on it.
Do you know what I think the problem with the first half of The Lost City of Z is? And I think it's the problem with a lot of movies. It's Charlie Hunnam. I just think he has no charisma.
Oh.
I like him I think he's a good supporting actor, but I can't get into a movie when he's the star.
I do want to take another stab at that at some point, both because now I understand James Gray a little better, and I'm constantly hearing like that movie propped up by different people as like a hidden gem that needs to be seen.
It's not as good as Congo if we're talking about movies that are about the Lost City of Zinj, but I'm joking. Of course, Congo's a fucking disaster. I wish that movie lost money so badly because it's so bad in a very entertaining and hilarious way. I love it so much, but it made too much money. Can't be on the pod.
Talk about angry monkeys.
Amy, ugly gorilla, ugly, go away. Amy want green drop drink. That's how she orders a martini.
Nice.
Because it's got an olive in it.
That's cute.
It is cute. I've lost my train of thought here thinking about Congo. I might watch it when we're done recording this. Yeah, so let's talk about Pitt because we just talked about Pitt not too long ago, but that was a older performance. Let's talk about what he's been up to recently. We don't need to do a whole career retrospective. He did make a cameo after this in The Lost City, not The Lost City of Z, but the one with Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock, which I never saw.
Yeah, I remember that existed, but that's all I know.
Yeah, it made like a surprising amount of money. I think it was one of the first post-COVID movies where people were like, oh, maybe movies can make money again.
Okay.
But it wasn't for me. And then he did Bullet Train, which was another movie that's no IP attached to it, but it was a hit.
That's the one that I was sure was a flop because it looked bad to me. I didn't even bother to check. It was like, what's his name shooting a three-pointer where I was like, that movie bombed. And I turned around and later found out.
Was that Nick Young?
That was Nick Young.
Swaggy P. From your hometown heroes.
I was like, Bullet Train sucks and it's about to bomb. And I walked away and it made money.
You were half right. Bullet Train does suck, but it's got it's got good performances from Aaron Taylor Johnson and Brian Tyree Henry. So it's worth checking out for that, especially with
fun actors.
Aaron Taylor Johnson. Apparently that was the role that got him considered for Bond. I don't know if it's been officially announced that he's gotten it, but everyone kind of knows he's gotten it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Now I know.
Yeah. Maybe they're just waiting to see how much money Kraven the Hunter loses before they officially announce it.
Yeah.
But
could be a stain.
We'll see. From the studio that brought you Madam Web. Really? That's what you're going with? What else? Oh, then he was in Babylon, if you want to talk about movies that bombed.
Oh, yeah. Do we have Babylon on the schedule?
No, but I'll put it on. I'll move that up in front of First Man because I don't want to do two Damien Chazelle and two Sad Boy Space movies close together. So I'll bump First Man and put Babylon on there. I'm not looking forward to watching it. I hear it's real bad.
I've seen some of the more outrageous parts of it, which were intense. And I am curious to see what happens in the story because I got the flash and the splash. But yeah, we'll make that fit in the schedule at some point. Also, we also said we were going to take a Brad break, so that's
true. He's a very winning actor, but he seems like a bad person, allegedly.
Yeah,
but he's got the Hitman buddy comedy Wolves, not Wolves, like a wolf times two.
That's a new Clooney thing, right?
Yeah, it's him and Clooney. It's a John Watts movie. John Watts, who directed some of the better new Spider-Man ones. I mean,
okay,
that could be good. I don't know. I could not figure out what tone the movie was going for from the trailer.
Okay,
so it'll be interesting to check it out. It feels like the kind of movie you want Soderbergh to do, and you couldn't get him.
Yeah,
because that feels, especially with Pitt and Clooney, it feels very much like a Soderbergh joint. Classic. But it's not. He's also filming F1 currently, which because everyone in America is obsessed with F1 racing all of a sudden.
I guess.
But let's talk about Tommy Lee Jones a little bit. He's not in this movie much, but he is second build and he's important to it. So
sure,
we've never had him on the pod.
Oh yeah.
Interesting to talk about. He's stayed very busy for a man of his age. He followed this up with Wonder, which was an Aaron Eckhart kind of crime drama, which I never saw. And The Comeback Trail, which seemed like a comedy with Morgan Freeman, like a bucket list type thing. Old dudes being silly. Isn't that crazy?
Okay.
And they both got bad to mediocre reviews. But then in 2023, he was in a movie. I don't think I brought it for show and tell, but I strongly considered it. Did I bring Finest Kind? Do you remember if I did?
I don't know, because I remember hearing about it. That's a Ben Foster joint, one of your boys.
My boy, yeah.
And I journeyed about 20 minutes into Finest Kind, and it was just, the mood was such a downer that
It's such a downer.
I couldn't hang with it at the time. I'm like, I have to be in a totally different state of mind to absorb this movie.
It's a dirtbag crime to a T. It would have been like a directed video movie 20 years ago. Now it's like a direct to streaming movie, and it was not bad. But give me Ben Foster as somebody who's forced into a life of crime because of his circumstances. Oh, should I make another Letterboxd list?
Oh yeah, that's a whole list right there.
And then he made a movie called The Burial, which based on the poster, I was like, this movie looks terrible, but apparently got great reviews. It's got like a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes with Jamie Foxx. Have you seen this one?
I heard about that one, but I have not watched it.
I kind of want to check it out now because word of mouth is strong on that one, but I feel like it came and went without much fanfare. So I've got to go revisit it.
Kind of like an over the top courtroom drama based on a true story. story, maybe?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And then next he's got The Razor's Edge coming out, which couldn't find much information about what that's about. I assume it's not the Razor Ramon biopic because that'd be weird for Tommy Lee Jones.
I think that's a classic novel that's been made into films before.
It's also like a crucifix powerbomb and is the finishing move of Razor Ramon.
Oh, okay. Now I understand what you were saying.
No, yeah, 1944 novel by W. Somerset Maugham tells the story of Larry Darrell, an American pilot traumatized by his experience in World War I. Maybe Tommy Lee Jones plays like the old version of him at the end of his life.
I mean, that's a good guess. He's not playing any young dudes at this point.
No, he looks old in this movie, and obviously in Finest Kind too. But he's got like the old man eyebrows where they get real bushy.
He's got old man everything, and they do a lot of close-ups, and you get to
the jug ears, and yeah, he's got them all going on.
Check all the skin on his face in great detail.
He puts in a good performance, though.
Yeah, one of the highlights of the movie.
That was AD ASTRA. Are you ready, Ian, for what comes next?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't have anything to do with space. I am done with space. No more space, please.
This is going to be a real kick in the balls. We're going back to space.
Oh, no.
In 2 weeks. We're doing Spaceballs finally.
We're doing it.
Ian has tried to watch this movie several times and has given up every time because he hates it so much.
I can't say I hated it because I love Mel Brooks and there's tons of funny people in it.
Yeah, you got John Candy, Bill Pullman, maybe not known for being funny, but he's very funny in this. Rick Moranis, all-star cast. Even Joan Rivers as the C-3PO surrogate.
Oh, geez. Okay.
It's bangers, wall to wall. It was maybe my favorite movie as a kid. Like, I watched it all the time. I have not watched it in maybe 10 years, so I'm really excited to sit down and watch it again.
That's a very ominous pronouncement for you to make on this show.
God help me.
You revisit an old childhood favorite. They crash and burn. Pretty good percentage of the time. We're going to see. I'm hoping to find something to truly love about Spaceballs.
Hey, Drop Zone surprised us all, and we kind of liked it.
We did.
That was what I assumed was going to suck, and it did not. So
it was cool. Fingers crossed. Spaceballs crossed.
Broken the mold a couple times. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Now let's see how you handle it. Makes me giggle. There's no way I'm going to hate Spaceballs just based on nostalgia alone.
You can't. It's not very likely.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. If you don't, I'm going to start saying this at the beginning of the episode and make you all listen to it right away. So
you have to hear it.
Just do it. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at BlastZonePod. You can email us movie suggestions, questions, feedback, criticism, shipbuilding tips for Ian.
Please, I need the help.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.